Raising plants from seed is a great way to get your garden going for minimal cost. And if you're sowing veggie seed, then you've got total food security because you know exactly what's happened to the plant all the way from that seed stage right up to when you harvest. And there's nothing nicer than popping out into the garden, harvesting something you've grown yourself and getting it straight into the kitchen. It tastes so much better than anything you buy in the supermarket that's probably been hanging around there for a couple of days. You might think it's hard to grow from seed, but just by following a few simple steps, you'll have great success germinating seed and growing those on into nice, healthy, strong plants. It really depends on what crops you're growing as to how you sow the seed. Root crops like beetroot and carrots really needs to be sown directly into the garden bed because it doesn't like to be disturbed once it's been planted. Other big seed like peas or beans can also be sown in this manner. So we'll start by preparing the bed. We want to fork it over, remove any weeds, stones or other debris, then grab a rake and just rake it nice and level. We want a nice fine tilth, something like breadcrumbs is ideal. Once you've raked your seed bed level, just go over it with the back of a rake or with a board just to consolidate the soil down, firm it nicely, and then you're ready to plant your seeds. There's a few different ways that you can sow seed. The traditional way for sowing crops is in straight lines or drills, and you can just make a straight line with your finger or a bamboo cane or something, and then sow your seed into that. Sowing nice and thinly not only saves seed, but it also saves you time. For when you go back, you won't need to thin them out so much. And then just lightly cover. You only need to sow seed twice the depth of the size of the seed. So something like carrot that's a tiny little seed barely needs to be covered at all. When it comes to sowing the larger seed, like these peas, they can just be sown individually. So place them out, following the spacing that's on the front of the packet, and then just simply push those into the ground, remembering again twice the depth of the size of the seed. Another method for sowing seed, which really uses the most of the space, is to use the matrix method. All you need for that is a piece of wire mesh. This one here's got 10 centimetre squares. Once you've prepared your soil, you simply lay the mesh over the soil and you've got a planting grid there, which gives you the spacings that you can use to sow your seeds at. It's also really good because it keeps the birds off. They tend to come in once you've sown your seed and they can dig around and make a bit of a mess. So this tends to fend them off. So I've got a packet of broad bean seed here, and on the front of the packet it says the spacing is 20 centimetres. So with each of these squares being 10 centimetres apart, it's quite easy to get an accurate sowing space. And then again, just push those into the ground. Now once you've sown your seed, don't forget to label and date it and give it a good watering in. Using a watering can with a fine rose stops the seed being washed away. It's really important that you keep your seed well hydrated until it germinates. If the seed dries out at all during this time, it will fail. So it might mean watering twice a day depending on the weather, but make sure it doesn't dry out. If you're sowing seed of climbing plants, it's a good idea to put the support in as you sow the seed. This way there's minimal disturbance to the plants as they grow. These Figo connectors are fantastic. Not only can you build teepees, but you can also build a frame to go over your veggie garden that you can throw a net over just to protect your crops. Now if you're sowing flowers, you can just broadcast these onto the soil And if you mix them with a bit of dry sand, then you can actually see where you've put the seed and how thickly you've sown it. Another method you could use is to make a pattern on the ground, like this X, sow your seed in those lines, and as your seed germinates, you can see exactly where the flower seed is, and anything outside that you know is a weed and you can get rid of it. As the seeds germinate and you thin them out, the plants will then grow up and grow together, and you won't notice that you started with this quite formal pattern. It'll just all meld together and you'll end up with a lovely patch of flowers. Always check the information on the seed packet, which will tell you important things such as how and when to sow your seeds. It will also give you the recommended spacings, how big the plants will grow, and the expected number of weeks to flower or to be ready to harvest. Some seeds better sown in a container. Tender crops like tomatoes, capsicums and eggplants need to be sown indoors in a warm environment, and then you can plant them out later in the garden when you've got a nice robust plant. You can really use any kind of container to sow your seeds in, but if you're using something recycled, make sure it's nice and clean and make sure it's got adequate drainage. There are lots of pots available, especially for the job. These quick pots here are ideal because when you pop the seedling out, there's minimal root disturbance. But these punnets or the jiffy pellets, or you can use these peat pots, which when you sow your seed into that and the plant develops, you just put the whole thing in the ground and the pot eventually disintegrates. Or else you can just sow directly into a seed tray with no pots at all. So you can see there's a huge choice available. Make sure you use a good quality seed raising mix to fill your containers. Fill it right up to the brim and then level it off. And just tap it to firm it down and give it a light watering. These bottle top waterers are ideal for this job. Now you can sow your seeds. If you sow a couple of seeds into each cell, that gives you a good chance of germination. So if one seed fails, then the other one will grow. And you can just pinch out the weaker seedling once they've germinated. Once you've filled the whole tray with the seeds, just go over and give it a light dusting of the seed raising mix, just to barely cover the seeds. Water them in again. And don't forget to label and date your seeds so you know what you've sown and when you've sown it. Remember that for your tender seeds like eggplants, tomatoes and capsicums, they need a temperature between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius to germinate. If you haven't got a warm sunny windowsill to put them on, you could use one of these greenhouse tops, which helps to keep the temperature in, or you could go for one of these heat mats, which has a constant temperature under the seedling tray. If you want something a bit more exact, you can sit your seeds onto one of these heated propagation mats, and you can actually dial up the temperature relevant to the crop that you're growing. Now make sure you keep your seeds well watered until they germinate. If they dry out at all, then the seeds will fail. And don't forget this is a heated mat, so you'll probably need to water them twice a day, and just keep an eye on it. Now when your seeds do germinate, the first set of leaves that come out are the seed leaves, and these are usually a rounded leaf. The second set is called the true leaves, and these most closely represent the adult plant. This is the time when you know that the root system has developed enough that you can either transplant them into a pot or you can put them out into the garden, depending on what it is you're growing. Now to transplant these, you need to take them by the leaf. It's important you don't touch the stem, as this is very tender and it can get crushed easily. Use something like a chopstick or a pencil and just get in the seed raising mix there and just tease out the roots, and there you can see that it's got a lovely root system developed on there. You just need to make a hole and drop that in and then gently firm the potting mix around it. And now that's ready to be grown on into a nice plant. Now there's just a few things to remember when you're raising your seedlings. If you find them all leaning towards the light, then just rotate the tray every couple of days and they'll soon straighten back up again. And don't forget you've raised all these in a really warm, protected environment indoors, And if you put them straight out into the garden, it'll be too much of a shock for them. So you need to gradually introduce them to that environment. So that's easily done by putting them out during the day and then bring them back in at night time. If you do that for about a week or so, they'll be hardened off enough so that you can leave them out in a nice protected spot until you're ready to plant them into the garden. Now the other thing that might happen when you sow your seed, you might sow them too thickly and they get a bit congested in the tub. So don't be afraid to just go through and just simply pinch off any that are overcrowded. And while this might seem a bit harsh at the time, it actually gives those left behind much more space to grow and develop into good strong plants. Now you might be thinking, well, that's all very well, but I don't have a garden. But all these techniques work perfectly well whether you're planting into pots or containers. Now the magic of this whole process is that you start with the seed and you follow the plant through every stage of its life to the final reward, be that fruit, flowers or vegetables.